We're speaking with Tony Pasin, the member for Barker. How are you, Tony?
I'm well, thanks, Ricky.
Now, there's been some good news. Let's start with a conversation about this opportunity with pulses and plant proteins, some investment across regional SA, including in your electorate.
Yeah, that's right. You recently heard of the announcement, a consortium of Australian businesses, including Barker's own Thomas Foods, developing a pulse protein processing facility. I think they call them veggie burgers. Ricky, I'm not that familiar with them, I've got to say, but a huge opportunity for pulse producers in Australia and in South Australia in particular. Close to a $200 million investment across state and federal governments. Anything that delivers 380-odd direct jobs and 8,500 indirect jobs is a good thing. In terms of Barker particularly, I'm really excited that the R&D facility, Pulse Protein Research and Development Facility, the first of its type in Australia, will be located at Kingsford in the electorate. And so I expect all the pulse growers, the broadacre farmers in Barker and surrounds, very excited about the prospect for another place for their product to go added downstream processing.
And you mentioned R&D. The impression I get from what I've caught from this veggie burger end of the world is that they're looking to make it have the same sort of texture and taste and feel of meat as people seem to want to migrate in that direction.
Yeah, well, there's certainly a segment of the community that is interested in, animal protein-free substitutes. As I said, I don't think it's for me. I'll give it a go, but I don't much care. It's not about my individual preferences. It's about creating jobs, driving investment. This is a great win for South Australia.
Yeah, it sure is. Now, some other involvement in the federal government in, I guess, the affairs of South Australia's river communities is in relation to this movement of water down the river and the impact that might have with localised flooding as we try and create more, I guess, capacity to manage the water coming through?
Yeah, we've for a long time been working on our constraints management strategy, and there's some constraints management work that needs to be undertaken. Recently announced close to $20 million in terms of works. This involves raising bridges and roadways across floodplains to enable us to, if you like, transfer higher volumes of water at any one stage through the Murray system. And so these works are important to ensure that we remain connected across floodplains and that we can flush appropriate amounts of water from an environmental perspective, but also to ensure we manage and mitigate flood risks. And so I was pleased to see Keith Pitt announce that together with Minister Spears recently. We're bringing forward that investment. It's an example of the South Australian state government leaning in to issues around the Murray, and I've got to say that's been my experience over the last 4 years. Other states seems to want to obfuscate and fight around issues relating to the Murray-Darling Basin Agreement, whereas South Australia just wants to get on and get it done, which is, I think, what river communities want to see.
Yeah, it's a classic example of what if Victoria's got a problem with its obligations under the Basin Plan, it's about this very thing about flooding of low-level properties, but this is all just upstream of Lock 1, I gather, and it seems like the communities are well and truly on board on the need for this for river management.
I've never had a member or constituent in my electorate approach me and say, you know what we need less investment in the river, we need less infrastructure. People understand the importance of river flows, and in order to achieve those particular high levels, we need to invest in infrastructure to ensure that we, as you say, Ricky, mitigate against flood risks in particular areas, and that means raising roads and bridges, which is what we're going to go and do.
All right, now when it comes to rebuilding regional communities, I guess off the back of drought not that long ago, but other climate and similar impacts, there's been some further funding announced by the federal government for local communities to grab hold of creating, I guess, social and other connection opportunities for their communities.
Yeah, it's $5.2 million to assist small communities to recover from the impact of COVID. These will be modest, but I hope meaningful grants. Throughout Barker, they'll amount to grants of up to $10,000. They'll be administered by the FRRR, the Foundation for Rural and Regional Renewal, and they'll be distributed across the nation. What I want to see is a disproportionate number of applications from Barker, and anyone wanting to make such an application can jump on the website, go to FRRR, alternatively ring my electorate office. If we can have a disproportionate number of applications from Barker, there's a good chance we'll have a disproportionate number of grants landing in the electorate, which is something I'm always keen to see.
All right, and speaking of landing in the electorate, the mobile phone connectivity, there's some more towers being deployed across the region as we continue to plug these black spots with connectivity, not only for the community but for farmers, becoming more and more essential.
Yeah, Ricky, there's always more work to do when it comes to mobile phone black spots, but really good news for 3 communities in Barker. Geranium, that has campaigned for a mobile phone base tower for at least 5 or more years collectively as a community. Narung and Colback, I've got to give props to their respective local government areas. So we're talking about the Southern Mallee District Council and the Coorong District Council. These towers have been facilitated by the Black Summer Bushfire Funds. Both councils made it a priority to seek funding for these towers from that fund, as a result of which 100% of the costs of erecting these towers will come from the federal government, and we will have, as I said, mobile phone towers in those communities of Narung, Colback and Geranium. But, Ricky, I want your listeners to know this is a constant bugbear of mine. I know there's more work to do. I know there are community members listening to this right now going, that's great for Geranium, but what about us in our community? And I'm here to tell them I'm continuing to fight for better and more funding for the mobile phone black spot program, because I get it. It's the number one issue that's raised with my office, with me, and all of us living in rural, regional, remote Australia want better mobile phone service.
Yeah, we're watching the federal budget with interest here and keeping in touch with Bridget McKenzie's office, the Regional Telecommunications Minister, because there was this review of regional telecommunications and there's been some recommendations. Maybe you should be able to switch between Optus and Telstra on the same tower for if you're a farmer, for instance. These are suggestions coming from some of your Liberal colleagues in the state election campaign. Is there more movement on the federal government front, not just to have black spots fixed, but maybe because government invests so much in these towers to require the private telcos to maybe be a bit more liberal when it comes to, if I could use that term, when it comes to connectivity from their towers?
Well, Ricky, in the most recent rounds of the Mobile Black Spot program, noting that the funding we've just provided doesn't come from that program, but for the most recent rounds, we've made it a condition precedent to any application that the applicant, whichever telco it is, makes the infrastructure available to any other telco. The challenge here is not issues around that. The challenge here is the attitude of the telcos. We currently provide 50% of the costs of erecting a tower, and it is not attracting enough interest from telcos. I've told my colleagues that what we need to do is lift that threshold. If we have to, as we've done at Geranium, Colback and Narung, pay for all of the tower, I don't particularly have a problem with that. I don't think your listeners who are in desperate need of a mobile phone reception care too much where the funding comes from or where these thresholds are. They just want the tower. In return for, in my view, funding the full capital costs of any such tower, it should be the community that decides where those towers go. At the moment, telcos are very much in control of that decision. I think if your listeners as taxpayers are paying for a tower completely, they should choose where it goes. I think that decision should be in the hand of local councils or collections of councils, regional authorities like the Murray-Mallee Local Government Authority. I think that's the way forward, but I can tell you, Ricky, some pretty significant work is going into a package around mobile phone connectivity for announcement in the forthcoming federal budget. I've got my fingers crossed. I certainly can tell your listeners it's amongst my rural, regional, remote colleagues, the number one ask that we've made to Treasury at Frydenberg. And so it's a matter of watching this space. We're only less than a month away now from learning what is in that budget, and I'm hopeful that there is a significant package around mobile phone connectivity in the bush.
Well, we'll be all watching that with great interest. It does seem to me that often the high spots where you want to put a tower is public land. It's usually a park of some sort because it's not that flash for farming. So you'd think public land would be the right place to drop one.
Yeah, I mean, access to the land isn't the issue so much. The towers cost about $1 million, half of which is building the tower and providing electricity. The other half is the hardware that goes on the tower. The reality is that telcos are increasingly disinterested. They don't see the benefit in servicing small, uneconomic communities. That's why the government's had to step in. There's been market failure. We've run a program that has subsidised the construction of those towers to 50%. It's now plainly not enough because even at that rate, telcos are disinclined. And so I think there's an obvious solution. We've just got to fund it up. And the reality is, there's a great compact between rural and metropolitan Australians. We disproportionately contribute to the GDP. Those of us who live in the regions, we disproportionately contribute to tax revenues. All we want in return is to remain connected. And once upon a time, that was rail, roads and bitumen. In a modern era, it's now digital connectivity. And, we need to ensure that we are appropriately connected because otherwise the divide between country and city just keeps growing, Ricky.
All right, well, we'll watch a bit like Politicians' Christmas, the federal budget. Every year you're looking forward to getting something good to share with your community. So hopefully we've got some good presents for our community after the March budget.
Well, let's hope they're meaningful and they drive productivity. That's my interest.